Thanks so much for joining us. As always, we are joined by Greg Engert, Beer Director for the Neighborhood Restaurant Group, which includes such places as Roostico, 2 locations in Alexandria and Ballston, also Columbia Firehouse in Old Town. Talking about a bit of a diamond in the rough here, I think, today. What's on tap this week?
Well, this week we are doing another DC beer from another DC brewery because, of course, we are at the tail end of the DC Beer Week, which has been an amazing success, great time all the way around. And actually, one of my favorite events of DC Beer Week has become an annual affair, and it's a cask festival, a local cask festival that's held at the District Chophouse. And you know, with the influx of these the newer breweries in DC, I'm talking about 3 Stars, of course, which we talked about last week. DC Brow makes great beers, and then you have Chocolate City. Blue Jacket from us is coming up. We're kind of losing sight of some of the places that have been around for quite some time, and one of them that I think has made great beers for a long time and still very much does is the District Chophouse, and under the tutelage of brewmaster Barrett Lauer, who's a close friend of mine and an absolute fantastic guy. He makes fantastic beers. He's got a very nice resume in the industry. And Barrett loves cask ale, so he holds, which we did on Thursday night, this huge cask ale festival, and we brought one of our Blue Jacket beers to that, which was really fun. And Chophouse is a great place to go and get beers, and Barrett here today has made something that is phenomenal. He calls it pale lager. He's one of those guys that doesn't like to name his beers really very often with any kind of frills or anything like that. They're named after the style, which in this case is quite interesting. Because when we hear pale lager, we think kind of humdrum, we've had that a million times. It's going to be lighter, refreshing, probably maltier, a little bit toasty, bready sweetness, crisp, easy drinking, maybe you have some great complexity. But in effect, he's actually made something that's different than that here. This is very much a kind of Americanized pale lager. Rather than hovering around 5%, it's almost 6% at 5.8%. And rather than just including noble hops from Germany or the Czech Republic, that would give it a mild dry bitterness, some floral earthy qualities, he's hopped it with American varietals, Crystal, which gives it a little bit of a leafy herbal note, Centennial, which if you've ever drank Bell's Two Hearted Ale and you enjoy that, you love Centennial hops because that's all that's in Two Hearted. So kind of an IPA hop, right? So big sweet fruit floral notes from that, as well as Simcoe, which is known for giving us a little bit of grapefruit but a lot of pine. And not only is he brewing with these, adding these hops into the boil to extract bitterness and some flavor through aroma, he's also, during the lagering phase, so after it's done fermenting for a full month, this beer is lagered. It's lagern in German means to store, so it's going to lay down for a full month, allowing the flavors to compose themselves. All flavors created through fermentation will go away, and it'll kind of arrange itself into a very unified whole. Well, while it's doing that, he's not done hopping the beer. He's added Simcoe hops again.
keep going.
Into the dry hop phase. So you're putting that into the conditioning tanks as the beer is lagering. And what this is doing is pulling out not bitterness, but aroma. And so, Brennan, when we taste this now, smell it first, you get a big, huge hit of pine and sap and resin.
It's very
right off the
inviting.
top. Yeah, it's very good. It's a phenomenal beer. Comes through clean and crisp. It's great. It's not an IPA. It's still very much a Germanic lager. It's still very clean and crisp. It's effervescent, but it's dry and balanced. It's not overly bitter, but it's got a really cool kind of mineral steel quality in the finish. It kind of gathers itself up as a really refreshing dryness, and I just love the way the hops come through in the nose.
This beer, you think, wow, that is really good. What have I had like that before? But it's, in a way, I hate trying to compare a unique beer to maybe some other beer I've had before.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. It's cool. It is. It's very much like a pale lager, a Helles lager, something that's refreshing but flavorful, of course. And it does have good malt character too. It's got this kind of bready, mild toast sweetness up front, a little biscuity quality there. But then it quickly transforms into this really nice hop meets malt character in the finish. It's just great. I mean, it is truly a pale lager with a little bit more strength, almost like a Bock, and more hops like a Pilsner, but these hops are American. So a really cool hybridized style.
How, and you mentioned a bit of the brewing process and the lagering process, how is it different? If someone saw this on the shelf or they're sitting at the bar at Chophouse, is it different from a pale ale? Because I don't think people are usually, they aren't normally used to hearing pale lager. They're used to lager.
Lager in general, yeah. Well, so the pale part in lager is just telling you that it is like, more golden straw-like in color versus, say, an amber or Vienna style lager that's more amber in color, or a dunkless or dunkel, dark lager. Okay, so that's where it is there. Now, pale ale just comes historically from the fact that for most of beer's history, it was brown in color, just because of the way you malt your grains during the malting process. You're going to dry these grains over open fires primarily, and this is going to darken the grain and thus your beer. So when the English came up with the means to create malt that would stay pale during the malting process, now suddenly beers took on a much more pale hue than they once had, and so therefore they were known as pale ales. So nowadays, pale ale is not so-called, there's pale ales, there's amber ales, and then dark ales we probably refer to as porters or stouts typically, or even black IPAs and things like that, or Belgian strong darks. But really, if you were to sit down and say, what I think is actually interesting is that pale ale drinkers would really love this beer. If you're thinking about like Sierra Nevada Pale Ale or a hoppier ale, and they might not think they would because they'd probably be associating it with just a really crisp, refreshing lager. It has elements of both, and where it's different than a typical pale ale and what makes it so great for this season is that it's hoppy in the nose, definitely has a nice hop finish, but in between it's so much a lager. It's very crisp, it's very light on the palate, it's very refreshing. So if you love hops in the summertime, this is the beer for you.
And the ABV on this?
5.8%.
You mentioned
so
a little higher. Yeah, you mentioned that. So what to pair this with? I mean, it's steak.
You could do it with steak. I mean, it's certainly burgers, hot
dogs.
Right, because you're going to get a lot of great effervescence from this. It's going to really open up the food with whatever you're eating, and it's just going to you can quell heat with this. Is really nice because even though it's bitter, it's not too bitter. So you get your wings or anything that's kind of spicy. It's going to be great with. In a way, this reminds me of pilsners that typically came from the north of Germany. Pilsners like Jever or even Bitburger today that you'll see stateside, although they're much fresher in northern Germany. And up there, they tend to pair those like really crisp and more hoppy pilsners with their seafood. So you get a really great thing. I mean, these with clams and oysters and things like that is phenomenal because you get this kind of earthy, dry minerality that goes so nicely with the brinier notes of the seafood.
It's really versatile.
Very versatile.
Wide range of stuff.
And great on its own, of course.
I have to ask, is this available only at the restaurant?
Yes, this is a District Chophouse beer. All of his beers are there. Now, from time to time, you'll see a cask of his or a keg of his pop up at Church Key, for sure, in the district and elsewhere from time to time. But if you really want to keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on with Barrett and his brewing, head to the Chophouse and definitely try his beers and also ask for him. He's one of the nicest guys on the planet, and also he loves to talk about his passion, which of course, like mine, is craft beer. And as a lowly brewmaster, he's there all the time. So he's definitely one of those guys that would love to chat with you and even have a beer with you. So definitely make sure to ask for Barrett Lauer, brewmaster, when you head into the Chophouse.
I met him recently as well, also a nice guy. All right, so he likes to answer questions. Barrett does. Greg likes to answer questions. The email, if you'd like to ask Greg, is beeroftheweek@WTOP.com. Greg, thank you as always. We appreciate it. Be sure to always drink responsibly, and don't forget to bring your thirst next time for another Beer of the Week.